You're very welcome to Confident Women Ireland's Woman to Woman show with me, Roisin the Cleric. Joining me for this episode is local Kilkenny author Eimear Lawlor. Eimear Lawlor is the author of Dublin's Girl, a historical novel based in 1917 during the time of the Irish Civil War. Eimear, you're very welcome to the Woman to Woman show here on Confident Women Ireland.
Thank you very much for having me, Roisin. I was delighted to be asked.
This is a lovely book.
Thank you.
But before we get into that, can you tell Confident Women Ireland's audience who Eimear Lawlor is and what inspired you to write the historical novel Dublin's Girl?
I am a mother. I always say first and foremost, even though I have other hats as well. And I've always been an avid reader. I grew up in Cavan in the I was born in 1968, but it would have been the 70s where we had just one TV channel, a few from the north, because we got some BBC channels, but I always did a lot of reading.
Yes.
And I always read, had a great imagination for reading. And even though I actually didn't really write that much, creative writing, I always had a fascination with things, and what I loved from books was being able to journey different places. And even when I left school, I was okay at English, I was okay at science, so I decided to study science.
So your background is in science?
Yeah, I did a degree in biological sciences.
Right.
So I didn't have a very long science degree, even though at the time, when I was a child, I think that's just where my imagination came. I always thought I'd be a great scientist. And I always liked the idea of being a scientist more so than the practical side of actually studying really hard and getting a brilliant degree, a brilliant career. I think it was just me watching too much Star Trek. And I met my husband, John, in London.
And he's a Kilkenny man?
He's from Kilkenny. And bit of a whirlwind romance, really. I think I met him, was engaged within 8 months. Wow. I was married a year and a half later and had my first child. Literally, I was a honeymoon baby. Oh. So within 2 years of me meeting, I was about 26, I was 28. I was living at Kilkenny, a house, had a baby. And I was doing teaching, I was doing some adult education and some secondary school teaching, and I did a H-dip. I never actually did an awful lot of secondary school teaching. I did some teaching. So I had my second child, Ciara, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. And I would have been a stay-at-home mum and always tinkering, doing courses and things like that on the internet. The children were dyslexic, so I learned all about dyslexia, and still never thought about writing creatively. Didn't even keep a diary, sort of jotted things down. But I suppose I'm quite funny. I find myself in the public eye now at the moment because I'm quite private, and even writing a diary, I think, I can't, in case something happens to me, people are going to read what I really thought. And they're going to think I'm mad. And out in my eulogy, this mad woman at my funeral. So the real inspiration, or I suppose the real kick for me, was my daughter, Ciara. She said to me when she was about 12, just do something other with your life than drinking coffee in town with your friends. I was thinking, well, okay. And funny, I saw an advert in the Kilkenny People for an NUI creative writing course. I still always maintained a huge interest in reading. And at one point I was thinking, the internet was really coming of its own then. And I was thinking, I'll do an online book club or something like that. And then I saw this course and I was thinking, well, won't I? And I did apply. Did get accepted, and then I pulled back and said, no, I can't do that. Right? I forgot about that. And I said, oh no, I for whatever reason, I think I made some sort of an excuse or something. So Ciara said this to me when she was 12. And so I applied for the course, it was a weekend course for a year. So I was shocked when I got accepted. I had to write a small piece first. I really hadn't written anything creatively at all before this. Might have done a short story, but nothing. I can't even remember what it was. I'm sure I would if I had. I would have remembered. And on the course, I felt like a bit of a fraud, really, because everybody that's there were teachers, reporters, or poets.
Right.
So I had to write a short piece on the course. And when I was there, I was actually doing it. I was thinking, oh, this is quite nice, because they do exercises. Now, if I write about this mug or something, so I would. And I think, oh God, I could write something about a mug, make a story of this. It's history, the history of the mug.
Yes.
So one of the court, we had to do a short piece, a part of a short story. And I couldn't think of anything. And just coincidentally, my cousin, who's huge into family history, sent me some of about my great aunt, who I had been aware of. My father told me about his aunt, my great aunt, his father's sister. No, be his father's sister. So it would have been my grandfather's sister. Had worked for Eimear de Valera.
Right.
And I have to admit, I've been a young person at 18 or whatever. Whenever he told me that, certainly when I was younger, I was probably like, who?
We all were.
And then when I did find out, so what's the big deal? So anyway, so I found out what the big deal was when my cousin sent me to call the witness statement, and it was of my aunt. And what happened was in 1954, it was the Fianna Fáil government at the time. Why Fianna Fáil is important, I'll tell you in a second. Fianna Fáil government in 1954 took statements of everybody that was involved from 1913 to 1922 in the history of our state. So that would have been, why the 1913, I'm not too sure, but I suppose maybe it's got to do with, I know that there was the Jacob factories, union strikes, and I think people were starting. And there would have been, the Gaelic League would have been very prominent then as well. And I think the Irish Brotherhood it was called. So they took statements of everybody who was involved in those years. My aunt, and then I read and I've been given a copy of my aunt's statements. They're on the internet. And I think they've just been released they're on the military archives. Anybody can go through them.
Really?
It's in Carl Brewer Street. So yeah, you can look up anything.
Can
the Irish
you?
military, yeah.
Never knew that.
The Irish, it's in Carl Brewer Street. Just look up my Irish Military Archives.ie. So whatever you want, yeah. And so it was my aunt, and her name is Vera MacDonald. And I read it, and I was absolutely shocked, really, because Vera goes to Dublin when she's 17. She went to the Underwoods Ladies' School of Typing in Leinster Street.
Very, very prestigious.
Yes. And she was only 17. And when I was reading the statement, now I knew who all these people were. She mentioned Michael Collins, Eimear de Valera, and then I was like, wow. And then she mentioned Ernest Bly, who I sort of knew as well, and what's his name? Harry Boland.
Oh, Harry Boland.
Yeah. And it's funny because Harry was in my book as well. And it just happened that I had my Harry and I had Harry Boland, and he was actually in the story. And I said, too many Harrys. I said, but Harry, the name suited my character. He was a Harry. He just, in my head, he was Harry, and that's what he was. He was nice, he was handsome, and he was a lovely man. So, and I couldn't get any other name to fit him. Anyway, and in the statement as well, she actually even brought a gun to a priest. And subsequently, then I've found out this priest is Father Flanagan, and he's very, very famous in Irish history as far as people who would have known Michael Collins. He was vice president of Sinn Féin at one point, and he was very vocal against the church, not against the church, but very, I suppose, pro United Ireland, even if there was violence involved in it, but he shouldn't have really been. So he was sort of excommunicated every so often, from shouldn't decide, we don't want to. And plus as well, I only subsequently found out he was actually a communist supporter.
Really?
Yeah, he would have been very anti-Franco. And the churches, and I only found that out recently, and I didn't know where he was buried because somebody called to me who I didn't know, called the door, she said, oh, I've got the story anyway. And she told me that about this, he'd been in his grave and everything like that. And it hadn't been marked because the church wouldn't mark it because he was pro-Franco.
And where's he buried?
Yeah. And anyway, but back to the story. When I did the short story course, I thought, this is fantastic. I'll write a little bit about Vera, because she was working with Michael Collins. So, and Aim de Valerie. So just a small piece. And it went down really well. It did actually go down really well. And I was like, I really should be surprised because I've never really written anything, but I just found myself getting into the character. And I could see her in Dublin walking down the streets and all these leafy trees and everything. I was on Pembroke Road, I'd never been to Pembroke Road, so I looked it up on the internet and everything. So when we finished the course, I continued to write. And we had a small writing group from people that were on the course, and it just, I remember on the course, I think this would make a great story, a great novel. Never wrote a novel, never aspired to write a novel. So this would have been around the end of 2014. The course was finished in 2014 in June, so it would have been after. So anyway, I wrote a lot of the novel wrong. I know how not to write a novel now.
You can share that with us in another day.
I just started writing anyway. So this whole story evolved, and as I was writing, these characters were coming into my head, like Aunt Betty and Uncle Tom, and a lot of nice people were coming in. So it was just, that's how the story really evolved from that. Then unfortunately, my daughter passed away. So really suddenly, I mean, any death is unexpected. She was only 17, and it was really weird. I remember thinking, but I remember this was always the back of my mind. And grief is absolutely, no, it is horrendous, but it absolutely destroys, not physically, but mentally as well. Your brain is just short circuits for a whole year. You can't think, your concentration goes, you can't do anything. And I was always thinking, I have to, I had 2 boys as well, and my husband, and you think of them, you've got all this pain and you've got all this other stuff going on in the background, which is the story, but you're dealing with all that, and still the loss of your daughter. And I was very lucky in Kilkenny's great community. I'm eternally grateful to all the support I got from my family, from my friends, from people I didn't know, and messages. And I was always, and one of my grief counselors told me to write down my emotions to process things. So I did always write, and I always think, and I always felt this story was always at the back of my mind, that I started writing it for Ciara, and I wanted her to be proud of me. I always felt like, because I'm sure she was proud of me, but because she could say, oh, my mother is going to work today and she's doing this and doing that. She'd always joke with me like that. We had a great relationship. I said, I'm going to do this to make her proud of me. So I just saw on Facebook about 2018, I think it was, that there's an agent coming over from London in X amount of times looking for Irish authors. And I sent my manuscript to somebody to sort of polish it up, because I couldn't really read anything. You really sort of, and I made an appointment, and I went up on the train to meet her. There's about 40 people there, and she signed, not there on the day. She didn't look at me and go, oh, you're fantastic, or anything like that. It was a process. It was like about a month, 2 months. I got an email after Christmas to say she liked the story and can she have the rest of the manuscript.
Wow.
So I sent it on to her then, yeah.
Ciara was, as she said at the beginning, she was the one that encouraged you to go to stop going and having just meeting your friends for coffee and just start doing things. Then you went on the course. So she's really
Yeah,
been there with you from the very beginning.
yeah, and still is.
Yeah.
You know, everything I'm doing now still is very much. Um, and she was, yeah. Even my agent said that once to me, because I was at one point I was actually, I actually felt like I couldn't handle it. You know, I said, "Oh, I can't do it. I can't do it. There's too much going on." And she was encouraging me, and something she just said, "I feel like I'm on a journey with the two of you." That's what she said
Yeah.
to me at one point. So, um, she was actually getting ready to send to the London Book Fair, which in February 2020, which is like a supermarket. I never heard these are things I didn't know. She's from Oxford.
Right.
Sorry, she's from Oxford. So we were doing a lot on Zoom and email, and she said to look at the book fair. And then we had the pandemic. So that was cancelled. I thought, okay, grand, that's okay. But that was kind of good in one way, because all she did was email it to loads of different publishers.
Right.
I've never been to the London Book Fair. I know I've heard Can Kiley from
Yeah.
Can's Books talk about it, actually.
Yes. She's always talking.
Yeah, and that's
There's nothing Kylie doesn't know about books or publishing.
yeah. And it was her, actually. Yes, I remember her saying it to me once, because I would have always bought books of Can.
Yeah.
And it's great. She knows even since I always remember this from my first child, and she worked in a small shop, and she found at Grand Throw Cafe, and I'd go and she goes, "Oh," and this back in the day when I read like all horror, she said, "Oh, I know what you like." Yeah, it was great.
She's like that to this day.
I've matured a bit Donald McCann and right, you know, I read proper books now, I think. Don't write them, but I do read them. And so that's what was going to be. So this was kind of, in one way, it saves me being all nervous. And you'd be like sitting, I suppose, I don't know if I was going, but I would, like, you sit there and wait and see the people like it, and you have to. So she just sent it out, and 3 publishers were interested.
What? Wow.
Yeah. And this is the plus side of the pandemic is that we could Zoom everything, and I could meet the different publishers. I could meet 3 in one day.
Yeah.
And not be exhausted and not be rushing out. And so I met 3. 1 were quite small. One was, and then the third one was offering me a 2 book deal, and the other one offered me a 3 book deal. And they said, "Can you write another book?" I said, "Of course I can."
You just said, "Of course I can."
No problem. Whatever you want. So I did pitch something and said, "No, can you write something else?" And they were looking for something more historical. And I do like writing historical. I love reading historical books, and didn't realize there was so much work in them. That's the only thing. A lot of work, a lot of research. But I think I like the research because of my science background, and you can just sort of scan and do. That doesn't really bother me. It's just, I suppose, people like accuracy, and people will pick points. You might have 100 facts right, and they'll pick one that's wrong, and they'll get very personal about it, and they'll think, "God, that's terrible." And you think, "Well, the whole book, you know, it took me a year and a half to write this." We're all entitled to make a little mistake.
Yes.
So, and I just listened to a podcast, a documentary in one about the Second World War and a German spy. So I pitched this to them about it's kind of changed from my original idea. As you're writing, you evolve, and then I couldn't find what I was looking for anyway. And so I signed with them, and they published. It was released. Dublin's Girl was released January last year.
Wow.
And on Kindle, and then the hardback came out in April, and in Ireland that's called a large trade back. They do sell hardbacks here, but because of €25 or £25, they don't sell as many. And plus, interestingly enough, somebody said to me about the library book size, because hardbacks take up so much space.
Yes.
It's easier to have not just for the cost purposes, but you can fit not just 20 my books in one space. You can fit 4 or 5 different authors in the same space, as maybe 2 sections as a hardback. So these are all things I didn't know anything about. But they always release that first. So
yeah.
And because of the pandemic again, this is supposed to be out last October, but it's been delayed till April the 2nd. And then it's going to America in July.
America.
Hopefully. Fingers crossed. If there's nothing else happening, I just know it's just funny. I shouldn't laugh, but I saw the other day that it contained, because of the backlog of all the container ships, there was a storm, and one ship on container full of books got washed away.
What?
So you just don't know with these things. It wasn't my book, it was somebody else's books.
Wow.
But like, there's all of these things nobody ever thinks of. Nobody thought the pandemic was going to leave all these container ships sitting in the waiting, and it has to go in a container ship because they're not going to fly it over. So there's always, so anyway, so that's all been delayed because of all natural disasters, I suppose. But there's those things to be. So at the moment, that's the timetable at the moment for all of that.
Wow.
They're all very new to me.
Show us the small book,
yeah.
That, and what you said, this difference is, you were saying earlier, the heading on Dublin's Girl and the font is in white in
yeah, this is gold there, and that's in white, and you can see the size.
The size of it.
So even the thickness.
Yes.
So that can fit in your hand. So just for all your listeners who are watching this, you can fit in your handbag. Actually, interesting enough, in America, they've got through. Now, I don't know if mine is going to be out. I know the hardback is available in Amazon and Target, I think, as well.
Right.
But in America, they've got, and I didn't know this, they've got a book called The Magazine Size.
Really?
And I don't know if it's, I'm not looking up if it's thinner, but the reason, handbag magazine size, so it can fit in your handbag.
Oh.
I think it's smaller than this even.
Really?
Yeah, so, they call their handbags pocketbooks.
Right, I never knew that.
Yeah. So that's what I don't know if this is going to be in a pocket suit book. I really don't know.
God, I wouldn't be able to see the pocketbook print.
Yeah, I know. I hardly see myself. Don't worry about my glasses. Put your makeup on and then you put your glasses on, you think, oh my God.
I look like
taking them off.
What was the lady? Aunt Sally. If I put my makeup on, I look like Aunt Sally. No more Gummidge. Then I put my glasses on, I go, oh my God. So tell us about Veronica, who is the main character in the book, because she's a very strong, independent, spirited, typical Irish woman, which we all are, aren't we, really? We're very, I think all through our history, since even though it doesn't matter how far we go back in our history, because Clodagh Finn has written the book about the 21 forgotten women in our Irish history, and they are all strong, spirited women. And Veronica just reminded me of one of them women. She was really strong, independent, and a spirited young lady.
Yeah, when I started writing the book, I had her as Vera MacDonald. And I didn't know my aunt, my great aunt. She never married and no children, so I only knew. So I changed the name, and the premise of the story didn't change. My original first line on the course actually was, I said Vera MacDonald is fighting for her independence as a woman in a world of men. And not only is she fighting against her independence as a woman, but then gets caught up in the War of Independence. And it was only when I was writing the book that I realized, it actually didn't dawn on me till I had nearly finished the book, how silent women came after the war.
Yes.
After the new state. And because there would have been Countess Markovich.
Yes.
And then there was John Clark, who was in one of the signatures. His wife was quite strong, as far as I know. And we all knew about Kitty, John Collins, Michael Collins's partner. I don't think they got married. And so these are all names that I knew. But then after, when I finished the book, I realized these women are all gone. Yeah. These type of women, they were all involved. And I actually subsequently found out all my Aunt Vera and her sisters were all involved in the Cavan.
Really?
Yeah, I only found that out recently. And but anyway, I changed her name because I didn't feel right writing about her, and especially when she started meeting men. She was a spinster as far as I knew. So then I changed it to Veronica McDermott because that was easy to remember. I hope I remember to tell you at the end what something interesting cropped up about that. But it was one of the things I read while I was reading about women who disappeared was that, and I was listening to podcasts it's actually something from Kilkenny, Finn Dwyer, from Cascombe, but brilliant history podcast. And actually I would have listened to him a lot during my days of grief because I couldn't think, and even though, but I remember he did one podcast and was talking about all the women, they disappeared, they were written out of history. And it would have been the time Conradh na Gael came into power straight after the War of Independence, and they suppressed women.
And women were even airbrushed out of photographs as well.
Yes. It was just, I didn't even know that till recently. And it was like, I don't know, but I know that it also, but it actually even just wasn't even just in Ireland. I know there's a marriage bar here. Yes. There was a marriage bar. I've learned this only last year or so from my research into my current book. There's a marriage bar in the UK, in America, and in France, and in Holland.
Oh.
And Australia. Australia only got rid of the marriage bar in 1966.
And we were 72, weren't we?
Yeah. But the other countries got rid of the marriage bar because women always came to the forefront they were always valued during war. So it was all during the Second World War in the UK and in France and America. I presume, I'm not sure about how that, but I know those countries after the war, after the Second World War, the value of women were appreciated.
Right.
And or saw or realized that, well, they're doing, I suppose, even to the end, I probably just seen doing their factory workers, but they were given something. So, and even though they might be, maybe some women nowadays would think it was menial tasks, but it was something camaraderie. Yeah, but it wasn't even just using the brain. They were meeting people. Mm-hmm. They weren't stuck at home. They were getting out and they were contributing to the households financially for their own independence. Yeah. But anyway, Ireland still in the doldrums till, as you said, till the 70s.
Yeah.
But Veronica was I probably didn't do a very huge character sketch. Might have been a bit like me. Maybe I wanted to be very brave. I don't know if I would have been that brave.
Oh, you are brave. You're very brave. You're very courageous. I know,
and I just liked, and even though the romantic part was very, very small, because I was just trying to show this guy, Harry, to be nice, but also the way I was brought up in the border, and my father would have been very apolitical. And my grandfather was very involved in War of Independence as well, didn't know any of this. We weren't brought up with any of this. So I was just showing Harry, he was English, okay, he was in the army, but that didn't make him a bad person.
No.
He was doing his job. And as plenty of Irish people in 1916, 1914 went to fight for the British.
That's right.
There wasn't loyalty, they needed money.
That's right.
So this is the side I wanted to show with Harry, that you can't tar everybody with the same brush. And just because you're born male, female, black, white, Muslim, Catholic, you're no different at all. You're all human beings and you've still got the same feelings. And just because somebody's saying that you have to do this because you're from Carlow, you can't support Kilkenny. Something, I think I'll just do something like that rather than bringing racism and religion.
I know you didn't say Tipperary.
Yeah, okay, Tipperary. Well, I'm from Cavan, and Cavan people always have a thing with Meath people because in 1954 something.
Well, I'm from Derry, and we have a thing about Belfast people.
Oh, right. So that's what I'm saying. I don't think you have to be defined by your past.
No.
You are who you are. So I was trying to show Harry to be nice. So she got in a relationship with Harry. And as I'm writing, it sort of took legs and literally gave her a life that I don't know if she did have men in her life or anything, but she died a spinster.
Right.
And I didn't have, it's funny because I found out after I published the book, all my cousins that are older than me would have, and also was doing the research, and actually some of the other ones knew her, and she was a chain smoking. And I hated smoking. So none of my characters smoke. So in my new book, I have to throw in the cigarette.
But back then, Eimear, my mother was a chain smoker. My grandmother was a chain smoker. Women smoked really heavy back then.
Oh yeah, but everybody smoked.
Yeah, it was a cool thing to do back then.
I just hated the taste of it.
The smell of it.
Yeah. Actually, not just so much the smell of smoke, but the taste in my mouth would dry my mouth.
The mouth and funny, the throat tickly.
Yeah, so
you know what I loved in the book? I loved how you describe, it's very descriptive, how you describe even the train journey into Dublin, coming from Cavan into Dublin. And then the cart, and then when she met her uncle, and then even traveling by cart in the mornings into work.
Yeah, it's funny that I love taking the train, and it was just something on the creative writing course, because I was so new to writing. I was told to take a pen and paper with me and go places, and I used to try. I hate driving to Dublin. I'll drive around. I don't like long journeys, so because I travel and train a lot, so I used to always people watching the train, and I'd be looking at the fields going back by. So I would have always taken note of that. And I just find it interesting, and I didn't know if I was good at boring people by writing these things, but I suppose I was experiencing them in my own head as well, and from that I was able to see what it was like. I suppose I have everything in like a movie in my head all the time. If I'm thinking, and that's what I was trying to do, create the atmosphere of Dublin, and it was very easy because I suppose I was in Dublin so much, even as a child, because we weren't far from Dublin.
Yeah.
So, and we were on a good road.
It's only an hour from Dublin, isn't it?
We were only, because we were literally, there was no Blanchardstown, there was no motorway. We were in Dublin in 45 minutes.
Wow.
40 minutes. And it was a good road, very few. And plus there was less traffic, less houses, less people.
Wow.
So, and
I love the way she describes the house in Cavan and the family in Cavan.
That was my own house. I didn't do any character. That was my own house.
Oh, sounds idyllic.
Above, yes, I have to admit it's sold now, but it was beautiful. It's on a hill overlooking Loch Rammer, and I'd be a morning person. Even as a child now, I used to love getting up really early in the morning. Because my brothers used to go, I think it's now so cruel, rabbit snaring.
Oh God.
God, that's really cruel. I used to go with them. I was younger. I was the youngest, a good few younger. So I'd go with them, and the mist over the water, it would be beautiful. There's 32 islands on the lake.
Really?
It's the biggest lake in Cavan, and it's also 32 islands on the lake. I think it was 32, it says. So, and my father fished a lot. So I spent a lot of time, even as a child, going fishing with my father, because I was the youngest. And so my brothers went to boarding school. He used to bring me out to the lake an awful lot, actually, with him. And we'd go fishing, and we'd go down. And he was kind of like a gentleman farmer. He loved going down and looking at going down to count the cattle. He just look at the cattle and wait for them to pass. 1, 2, all the time in the world.
I loved how you described all that night traveling to Dublin. And then I loved how you described how she even got involved by accident in the War of Independence.
Yeah. Because I had no, as I said to you, I wasn't brought up with any of this history. And especially coming from Cavan, there would have been, during the 70s, there would have been a lot of, I suppose, anti-British sentiment within my community. But my father never told us anything because he didn't want any animosity towards anybody. Because my father, I suppose, is probably like Harry. He would have just liked everybody. And he never wanted to colour our impression of anybody else. Or like I went to a Church of Ireland secondary school, boarding school, mixed religion, mixed everything. So, and there would have been an awful lot of us and them, even in a small community in Virginia, there's quite a high Church of Ireland population, and there would have been snide people too. And it just wasn't right. So he never told us our grandfather's involvement, because he was quite involved in the Gaelic League. He's quite prominent in the Gaelic League. He was a county councillor in Cavan. He was involved in, and that's how my great aunt, she got a job with Sinn Féin. She was actually taken out of the typing school before she finished.
Right.
By Father of Flanagan, which is in the book, which wasn't a great feat of ingenuity for myself or anything like that. It was actually true. So I suspect, because of my grandfather's political connections, that's why she got the job in Sinn Féin. There would have been a bit of pull. But my father never told me any of this. And he actually went up and went to the civil rights marches with John Hume in the north.
Oh, yes. In Derry, yeah.
He did, and he got kicked out. He was told to go back down to the south. Don't be coming up here with your peaceful. Somebody threw him and someone else. And the guy is funny. He's passed away, Dr. McQuaid.
Well, I'm from the Glen, where John Hume was from.
Oh, right. Well,
I know Hume taught me in school, in St. Anne's Primary School.
Oh, right. Well, my dad went up to the north in the 60s, him and another guy, I think it was Dr. McQuaid. And Dr. McQuaid, I think, was Church of Ireland. So they would have went up to the marches, and somebody told him to go home.
What?
That's the only thing I ever knew about. And I had letters. My father did show me letters of my grandfather, who was captured by the Black and Tans, and he was in Crumlin Road jail in Belfast. And I've still got those copies, and they're at 1918. I've got some. He was captured. He was arrested. Wasn't captured. He was actually arrested because he was a commander of the local volunteers. So he was arrested twice, and he even talks about my grandmother Helen, who went to school with his sister Vera, who the book is about, and she was coming to see him in Belfast in prison with her friend Helen.
Oh.
So Helen's my grandmother, yeah.
Isn't that lovely?
So I just knew about these letters. So I would have been very young. I had no interest in any of this anyway, when my father told me. So when my father had passed away in 2012, and I think I got these letters, all this information, my cousin, around 2013. It would be the time I did the course. So all of this was new.
You never got the opportunity to actually talk to him about anything.
Oh, no, she died in 1974.
No, your father.
No, he didn't even know. He was so proud of this book, and he was a great, loved literature. He would have got me interested in that, but he loved nature. He loved literature. He had a great interest in, he could tell me trees when I was young. When I was younger, he had planted as a boy, and he loved fishing, and he knew all the leaves of trees and everything. He just loved all of that.
He just loved the land.
Yeah, and he loved Virginia. Like, he himself went away to boarding school, went to college, but came back to Virginia, and that's what he loved.
Oh,
he
and
loved
you know what I loved? I loved the relationship that Veronica had with the priest. And also, not the relationship, but you know how she would go up to him, she would go up to the parochial house, and the door would open, and he would say, "Come in," and then take this to so and so, and it was like, you know, she felt like, oh my God, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And then she had the relationship with the shop as well, with the people who owned the shop.
Yeah, Mrs. Sullivan. I think it's kind of like when I was writing, and I'm doing that again, actually. My next book, when I think of it, it's novel characters very similar. I just like to have a friendship with people in the book myself. It's like I look forward to writing about them, and they're my friends.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
No.
No, I have real people. I have real friends. They're not all made up. When I say that out loud, that's really sad.
Many authors, I would imagine many authors do build relationships with their characters in the book.
Funny, one of my, and back to my grief, I got the short story published when I was trying to do something. I always remember, and it wasn't until I was, I suppose, in the middle of grief that I really went into another place. I think it was like kind of like I might be swimming or I might be walking, and I'd go there, and it was kind of like a break. It was a breather, and it was only from that I said, so that's what I carried on doing. And I was thinking, and when you're doing that, you're living it in your head.
Yeah.
So I think that's, and then when I was writing more about it, I said, this is really nice, and I kind of liked. But it's funny, all my characters are women. Mr. Sullivan's husband was sick in bed.
Yes, that's right.
Mrs. Riley's, I think it was I think her husband was dead.
And you also talk about grief in the book, because Betty
yeah, I wrote
when
that.
Veronica goes in, she's tiptoeing because her Aunt Betty is grieving from her loss of her son.
Well, I didn't write that in my second book because I actually written that in 2015.
Yeah.
So I sort of went back to it and I said, oh my God, I'm not writing about that. I'm not putting that into any of my books again, because that seems like very karma. But I did expand it a little bit, but I did get it quite right, I thought, from my own experience.
Yeah.
I got a lot of it. And the only thing I did put an angel into it. Coline wrote the song called Angel for Kira. Then I'm always putting angels into my books.
Lovely.
As you can see behind me, actually,
yes, I see.
I got all these presents, angels from everybody. People go on holidays, so I have angels from Spain, I have angels from Portugal, and Kira had a huge amount of friends, and her friend, these are my real friends. Their mothers are my friends, you know. So, and we just, the girls would have actually been to the concert, and some of them were very upset afterwards. And so that's why I introduced that at the end, because it's like, well, the reason why I've got the book deal, and I wasn't a lot. Even recently, I read about somebody sending off to 80 agents.
Yeah,
I only sent it off to 2, and one would have been very, very early days, and I wouldn't have even opened the envelope to it. It was probably handwritten or whatever. So I had a long suffering career of knocking on people's doors. It's much easier nowadays anyway for a lot of people, but I didn't get a lot of, I suppose somebody was saying they get so many rejections. I didn't get many rejections. So I sort of felt like, you know.
Kira was probably that proud daughter you spoke about.
That's my husband keeps
knocking on the door saying, this is my mother. My mother's doing this.
It was really weird when I saw my book in Eason's the first time. It was supposed to be out in April the 1st, and I happened to be in Eason's about a week beforehand, just looking, and I saw it in front of me, and I was like, oh, wow. Oh, I wasn't expecting it to be there. They just put them out early. They put them out to get them. I mean, it's stock issues. It wasn't as they thought it was good. But as the books come in, they put them out, and that's just. And now I know. It's about, you learn so many little things going on.
Yeah.
And someone said, well, you must have been really proud. And I said, well, it was kind of a bittersweet moment. It was kind of such a weird. And I'd say the shop assistant was looking at me very strangely, because it's like, oh. And anyway, so that was kind of.
Look, I love the way you describe how Veronica first met Michael Collins.
Yeah, and that never came to me. And that's part of my research is I actually went to Harcourt Street, I rang them up, and it's owned by, it's not Conor Gael, it's the Gaeltacht now, the Irish speaking, that's about it, I'm Irish. And I rang them up and I said, my great aunt worked here. Do you mind if I come up and have a look at your offices just to get a feel for the place? So I did go up, and because they're the Irish speaking department, something in a Gael. And it was funny, they would have known Sean O'Hargan is in the Kilkenny, the Irish. Yeah. And when I was there, I was thinking, as I was going in the door, I was thinking, that's when the idea of Michael Collins came into my head. Instead of saying this man, I said, I just give him a big man. And he was a big man. So that's how.
Yeah.
I was very proud of that.
I love that. I think we all love Michael Collins, don't we? He's a great man within, I think, our Irish history, regardless, you know, and I think, and he was so good looking. And then I think the film with Michael Collins was so well matched with Liam Neeson as well.
Yeah.
I just thought, wow, you couldn't have picked a better actor to play Michael Collins than Liam Neeson.
I think he did a great job. I see no offense, Brendan Leeson was you know, I thought, even though I didn't think Liam Neeson looked like Michael Collins, but he just did, he was very, very good. It was believable. Very good now.
And the book, tell us too about Harry. Harry is a gentleman, as you said, and he's a really nice guy, but he was also an officer within the English Army during the War of Independence.
Yeah, and I decided then to make his mother, and I actually I was quite worried about people, did they have, you know, would have been credible for English and Irish to have relationships. But apparently there was lots of Irish girls having relationships, not just at the dances, one thing. Some of them actually got married, and I don't know the girl's name, but I had got her in interest. And there was a girl, she was a nurse, he was an English officer. So there were a couple of marriages, and there was plenty of relationships. When we fly by line things down at the local dances, whatever. But there was a good few serious relationships. Mm-hmm. So I had to make that credible. And I don't know if they were from mixed religions. And I don't think I don't know.
I don't think religion came into it back then as much.
Interesting, I was just watching somebody on, his name was Ken, on Tommy Tiernan, who is a professor, he works for Notre Dame University, and he was talking about how when religion came really important to Ireland after the famine, because it defined the Irish as us and the English as them.
Right.
That's where his summation of it, and that's what I think it was us and them. So when you're so that's why it probably wasn't important in Dublin, because Irish people did have jobs up there. There was a middle class coming up in Dublin, and there were plenty of Catholics becoming middle class. Mm-hmm. And Veronica's background herself, so this wasn't a lot of it. My grandfather would have had some land, and he had a shop. So they weren't poor. She didn't come from a poor tenant background. No. I know my grandfather's brother went to Blackrock College. My grandmother's brother would have been at Clongo, so they had a bit of money. So that part of it would have been, they were definitely not from the same background, because Harry would be more upper class, middle class English. So I said, I'll just make him Catholic, just easier. So his mother was Catholic, and his father was an officer. I said that in the book, I think. Yes. That he never got promoted because he was looked upon, down upon. So that's how I got around that.
Right.
And that was probably not something that was an issue at the time, but it would be an issue, questionable issue now. So I thought, well, even just in my head.
Yeah.
So
I loved the book. I really did love the book. And it's coming out. I want to talk about, just give a little teaser about your new book that you're writing, but this is coming out in the softback on the beginning of April?
Yeah, the 6th of April.
6th of April. And it's in locally here in Kilkenny, it's in Kang's Bookshop. And what other bookshops is it in?
It's been in the Book Centre and Easton's and Cans in Kilkenny. But the Book Centre have 3 or 4 shops, one in Wexford, one in Morford. And they own not Figures and Hobbit. They own one actually in Naas as well.
Right.
So yeah, it would be in all bookshops. It's Virginia. It's an all bookshop. Once Easton's puts it in, all the other bookshops.
And can you can, I know you can buy it online through Karen's bookshops. You can go on to Karen's books website.
I think what happened before.
Can you buy it on Amazon or anywhere?
Oh yeah,
else?
it's in Amazon. It's in Amazon UK. It's in actually even up in Target in America. So because I had looked, and it's in Kobo and it's on Kindle.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's actually doing quite well, surprisingly, considering because the pandemic, the English bookshops weren't open, and so it's only going into the English bookshops next month. So it's done. Yeah, there's over 300 reviews so far on Amazon, and a good few in Goodreads as well. So it's been doing well. Yeah, I'm surprised.
Delighted. I'm not one bit surprised.
I'm delighted.
So, Eimear, give us a little teaser. You're right. As you promised your publisher when you met them, when they said to you, can you do a second book? You are in the process of writing or finishing your second book now.
I am, yeah.
And can you give us a little teaser about what we can expect?
Yeah, it's set during the Second World War, and it starts in Kilkenny, and it's about a girl. So at the end of very kind of a story. It's kind of not a story. There's no romance in it, but it's a feel-good story. Good. And then she meets, which this was all new to me. A lot of Germans were interned here during the war that crash landed.
Yes.
So there's 260 in the Curragh, and there was some British German, and she works as German. She meets them, and it's all just about her journey and her self-discovery, and she plot twists and everything, which I'm still ironing out at the moment, so I won't give too much away, but it's all about 1941. Yeah, it's going to be her journey of discovering herself and discovering the time it is at the time, and friendship as well, which is a big thing as well, and not to tar everybody with the same brush.
Well, I met Kylie in the high street yesterday, as we do. And I was telling her that I was interviewing you today. And she said, Roisin, ask her, does she think? And I said, exactly. Do you think Dublin Girl will be made into a movie? And I said, it has to be made into a movie.
That's nothing to do with me at all. That is my agent sends it out. So for anybody on Netflix or whatever, I would love that, because everybody would love the book movie. But it's whether somebody sees it, of course, I don't approach people. They have to approach my agent, or she approaches them. If I was in any, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, if I was walking past Hollywood now, I'd be dropping a free book.
It's an amazing story, an amazing read. I really loved how you were so. Do you know what? Even when Veronica was walking up the street and she saw Harry and she tried to avoid him, she dropped something. I was actually Veronica. I was the nerves, and I was picking everything up. I'm praying he wouldn't come over to her and stuff. And and I think I can't remember, but she was carrying something going to the priest when she met him, and I remember that one. But it's an amazing story, and written by an amazing lady, and it's just lovely to meet you. We've met and we've spoken on the radio as well, but it's just lovely to actually be able to actually talk more and more about your book and be able to promote your book too, Eimear.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks for asking me. And
oh no, because I think too, Confident Women Ireland Woman to Woman show, we're going to actually start talking to you about learning difficulties, educational issues, and especially dyslexia, because I'm dyslexic as well, and so is my son. So going forward, we'll be talking a panel discussions about that. So we'd love to have you on for that.
1 in 4 people have dyslexia.
Yeah.
So it's very common.
Yes.
So it's amazing how many people got through school, and it's only in the last couple of years that they really recognized it.
Yeah.
And like my husband is dyslexic, and so my children. So it's terrible for him. When he talks about when he was younger at school, and how he felt doing his Irish exam, he just said he wished the ground would swallow him up, and he still remembers that. So I'm glad now. And there's lots of
What do you want to be reminded about?
I don't. She keeps talking to me.
All right, I've added it to reminders.
There she goes.
Oh gosh. Well,
Women.
we can't stop talking.
Yeah, honestly.
Well, Eimear, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much
What do you want to change it to?
for coming on the Woman to Woman show on Confident Women Ireland. We really appreciate it.
Thanks very much. It was great to chat to you, Roisin.
And continued success. And
Thank
you never know, we might all be watching you at the Oscars or at a premiere of Dublin School.
Oh, the telly would do me. I could give up. Go travelling. That's great. Thanks very much.
Eimear Lawlor, thank you so much indeed.
Thanks, Roisin. Thanks.